Imagine, if you will, the absolute pinnacle of global visibility. Like, think of the global baseball superstar Shohei Ohtani.
Right, the ultimate protagonist on the world stage.
Exactly. Picture him right now, stepping up to the plate. We all know that visceral image, the crack of the bat, the deafening roar of tens of thousands of fans just vibrating through the stadium concrete.
And millions more watching on high-definition screens across different continents.
Yeah, exactly. He is a figure of almost mythological proportion in modern culture. His talent is explosive, it's undeniable, and crucially, it is constantly observed.
Because it's the apex of what our society categorizes as impact, we sort of automatically equate the scale of the audience directly with the scale of the value being produced.
We really do. But let's shift the camera angle for a second. I want you, the listener, to picture Otani off the field, completely removed from that glaring spotlight.
Like in a totally mundane situation.
Right. Picture him in a quiet, mundane moment. He's sitting alone in a dimly lit cafe in Tokyo, or maybe tucked away in the corner of a quiet locker room. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his smartphone.
Okay.
He scans a small QR code on the table to pull up a nutritional menu, and he's browsing that menu via a local Wi-Fi network. In that exact moment, the global superstar is doing the exact same mundane action that you and I do like a dozen times a day.
He is interfacing with the invisible architecture of the modern world. I mean, the batting average, the fame, the millions of dollars, none of it matters to the network protocol.
No, not at all.
The digital infrastructure treats the protagonist of the world stage exactly the same as it treats the person serving him the coffee.
Which brings us to this massive paradigm-shifting question for you, our listener. You know Otani's face. The entire world recognizes that face.
Right.
But attempt, just for a moment, to picture the face of the person who invented Wi-Fi.
Good luck with that.
Right. Try to conjure an image of the lead engineer. Can you even name them? Can anyone walking down the street in Tokyo or literally anywhere else on the planet name the specific team of developers who actually gave us the QR code?
I mean, the probability approaches zero. The vast, overwhelming majority of the human population cannot name a single individual involved in either of those world-altering creations.
Yeah.
And that contrast is stark, It reveals a fundamental flaw in how we measure human contribution.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to take that exact flaw and examine it under a microscope. We are going to explore the quiet, almost entirely unseen mechanisms of how talent actually moves the world.
It's fascinating because we're really dismantling a pervasive societal illusion.
Exactly. The illusion that making an impact inherently requires being visible. Because we are fed this narrative from childhood, right? That success means standing on a stage, having your name in lights, or accumulating this massive online following.
And that narrative generates a tremendous, often paralyzing amount of unnecessary anxiety for people.
Absolutely.
Especially for people whose natural talents just don't align with public performance. If we strip away the cultural obsession with fame and look purely at the structural foundation of our reality, billions of people literally live their entire lives supported by an invisible infrastructure.
Yeah, we are floating on a sea of technical and logistical miracles built by completely nameless individuals.
Just consider the physics of Wi-Fi for a moment. People rely on the ability of specific radio frequencies, specifically the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, to penetrate solid drywall, bounce off architectural angles, and deliver gigabytes of perfectly ordered data to a microscopic receiver in their pocket.
Which is practically magic when you think about it.
It is, and they cannot explain the mathematics of orthogonal frequency division multiplexing that prevents those signals from just, scrambling into noise. Yet their livelihood, their connections, their basic survival depend on it functioning flawlessly.
So today, we are exploring why feeling ordinary or possessing a talent that society might casually dismiss as, like, boring, might actually be the ultimate blueprint for irreplaceable global influence.
It's the blueprint that actually runs the world.
So let's look at the mechanics of this invisibility because it completely challenges the modern doctrine of personal branding. We are constantly told to stand out, to trademark our ideas, to ensure we extract maximum visible credit for every ounce of work we do.
Right, the whole build your brand obsession.
Yeah, but there's a historical case study that proves why avoiding that spotlight or adopting a posture of total indifference to it is actually a massive strategic advantage. Let's examine the origin of the QR code and what we might call the economics of invisibility.
The story of the Japanese corporation Denso Wave is it provides a masterclass in prioritizing utility over ego.
I love this story. Set the scene for us.
So, to understand the gravity of their decision, we have to look at the mechanical problem they were trying to solve back in the 1990s. Denso was an automotive components manufacturer, tightly integrated with Toyota. And Toyota, as many people know, uses the Kanban system, which is this highly efficient, just-in-time manufacturing process.
Right, highly optimized. Yeah.
Exactly. But they were hitting a physical bottleneck with traditional 1D barcodes.
Because a traditional barcode is essentially just a single sentence of data, right? There's a
Yeah.
horizontal line of varied bars that can hold maybe 20 alphanumeric characters at best.
Yeah, exactly.
And on a dirty, grease-filled factory floor, if a barcode gets even slightly scratched or smudged, the laser scanner can't read it.
It just fails.
Yeah, so the worker has to physically stop, type the number in manually, and the entire multi-million-dollar assembly line literally grinds to a halt.
So the friction of 1D technology was literally choking the manufacturing scale. So the engineers at Denso Wave, led by a man named Masahiro Hora, whose name remains largely unknown outside, like really niche engineering circles, invented the quick response code.
The QR code.
Right. They moved from a one-dimensional line to a two-dimensional matrix. So instead of a single sentence, it's an entire page of text that can be read vertically and horizontally simultaneously, holding thousands of characters.
That alone is a massive leap.
But it gets better. They engineered complex error correction algorithms into the geometry. A QR code can be like 30% destroyed or covered in factory grease, and the mathematical redundancies allow the scanner to still instantly deduce the missing information.
That is wild. And they also added those 3 distinct squares in the corners, right?
Yeah.
The position detection patterns.
Yes, the finder patterns.
Right, which meant a factory worker didn't have to perfectly align the scanner like a cashier at a grocery store. They could scan it from any angle at high speed, and the software instantly understood the orientation.
It was a monumental leap in logistical technology. But the pivot point of modern history here isn't just the invention. It's the corporate strategy that followed.
This is the crazy part.
Once Denso Wave perfected this incredibly valuable technology, they chose to release the patent completely free of charge to the public domain.
Just here you go, world. Have it.
In the current era of tech monopolies, walled gardens, and, microtransactional licensing, that decision sounds almost incomprehensible.
It totally defies the standard capitalist instinct to hoard a breakthrough. But Denso Wave possessed a much deeper understanding of how true, long-term value is actually generated.
They prioritized the creation of a universally usable environment over hoarding immediate financial profit or chasing corporate fame.
Because if you invent a technology that fundamentally requires two-sided adoption, meaning both the businesses creating the codes and the consumers scanning the codes have to participate, any friction you introduce acts as a localized poison to the network effect.
Exactly. Friction kills the network.
Right. By eliminating the financial friction, they completely removed the barrier to entry. They recognized that the true power of the QR code wasn't in owning the lock and key, but in convincing the entire planet to use their specific door.
They traded the spotlight and the immediate licensing revenue for omnipresence.
Yeah, omnipresence. So we can clarify the brilliance of this by running a bit of a counterfactual simulation. What if Denso Wave had adopted the mindset of a modern Silicon Valley startup?
Yeah.
Right? What if they demanded a fraction of a cent every single time a code was scanned globally and insisted on strict branding requirements?
The technology would have suffocated in its infancy. It just would have.
Absolutely.
It would have remained a highly specialized, expensive tool restricted to the upper echelons of automotive supply chains. I mean, if an independent restaurant owner had to pay a licensing fee and sign a complex legal agreement just to put a QR code on a table tent.
They would simply print paper menus.
Exactly. And if a massive global logistics company had to negotiate a $50 million software contract to track their packages with QR codes, they would have just invested that money into slightly better 1D barcode scanners instead.
The attempt to extract maximum visible value would have destroyed the actual value of the invention. Gatekeeping is the enemy of widespread structural adoption.
It really is. By trying to build a moat of intellectual property around the QR code, Denso Wave would have isolated themselves on a very small island. Instead, by giving it away, they made their technology the bedrock of the global mainland.
I sort of think of it like a botanist who engineers the seed for an incredibly robust, fast-growing shade tree.
Okay, like this.
The modern instinct is to plant that single tree in a private greenhouse charge the public admission to view it, and put a massive neon sign with the botanist's name right above the door.
Right, you get the fame and the ticket sales.
Yeah, you achieve fame and you generate a localized revenue stream. But Denso Wave took millions of those seeds and quietly threw them into the atmospheric wind currents. They allowed massive forests to grow on every continent.
Wow.
They knew they would never receive individual credit from the people resting under the branches, but they achieved the ultimate influence. They permanently altered the global landscape.
The shade is ubiquitous, but the gardener remains entirely invisible. That is the operational advantage of anonymity. It allows the work to scale without the bottleneck of ego or brand management.
But I have to ask, and I think the listener is probably wondering this too, how does an individual living in a hyper-connected, socially mediated world actually justify this approach to their own career?
It's tough.
It is, because we are constantly bombarded with the message that if you don't aggressively post about your achievements, if you don't cultivate a visible personal brand, your work essentially doesn't exist. Silencing the human instinct that screams, "Look at what I built," is incredibly difficult.
It really is. It requires a fundamental rewiring of your internal metrics for success. You essentially have to divorce the concept of value generation from the concept of visibility. In our current digital ecosystem, visibility is frequently mistaken for actual influence. But influence, in its purest form, is the ability to dictate how people live, work, and interact.
Yeah.
If your genuine ambition is to change the operational reality of the world, you must recognize that friction is your ultimate enemy. And your own ego, your demand for public recognition, your insistence on intellectual paywalls, those are massive sources of friction.
They slow the whole thing down.
Exactly. The individuals who actually run the architecture of the modern world understand that anonymity is a superpower. It strips away the baggage. The work scales infinitely because it isn't tethered to the limits of a single human being's public persona.
It's profound. Let's transition this from abstract technological infrastructure to human capital. Because we have established how invisible technology shapes reality, but we really need to examine the people involved.
The ecosystem of success.
Right, there's a fascinating ecosystem of success where the ultimate visible talent and the ultimate invisible talent are locked in a deeply asymmetrical relationship.
The dynamic between the frontman and the infrastructure. It is literally the core tension of the entertainment and technology industries.
Let's use an archetype. Take Jim Carrey as the archetype of the frontman. He is a human being whose very existence operates as pure, distilled entertainment.
A total force of nature.
Yeah, he walks onto a set, contorts his facial muscles in these highly specific, irreplicable ways, delivers a line with perfect comedic timing, and generates an immediate chemical response, laughter, and joy in millions of people simultaneously.
And his talent is hypervisible. It is also incredibly easy for the market to evaluate. I mean, the audience either laughs or they don't.
Right, the feedback loop is instantaneous. And because of that immediate visible feedback loop, his talent is instantly lucrative.
And society observes the Jim Carreys, the pop stars, the visible CEOs, and internalizes a very dangerous lesson. We look at them and think, this is what peak human value looks like.
But that visibility is an illusion of independence, isn't it?
Completely. Jim Carrey's global reach is entirely reliant on a vast, hidden assembly line of deeply unflashy talents.
Think about it. If a teenager in Brazil is streaming a Jim Carrey movie on their smartphone while riding the subway, the comedic timing is only the final millimeter of the transaction.
Just the very tip of the iceberg.
Right. The delivery of that joke relies on the electrical engineers who spent a decade mastering the thermodynamics of the microscopic semiconductors inside that phone.
And we should really dwell on what that actually entails. An engineer designing a modern mobile processor is managing billions of microscopic transistors on a piece of silicon the size of a fingernail.
Billions on a fingernail.
Yes. And these transistors are flipping states billions of times per second, which generates immense friction and heat. If that engineer fails to optimize the microscopic pathways for electron flow, the processor overheats, the silicon physically degrades, the phone battery drains in minutes, and the video stream stutters and dies.
So the engineer is fundamentally fighting the laws of thermodynamics just so that Jim Carrey's face can render flawlessly in high definition on a moving train.
Exactly. And when Jim Carrey boards a private jet to fly to a premiere in London, his safety isn't guaranteed by his charisma.
No, definitely not.
It is guaranteed by the software developers who wrote the millions of lines of redundant code for the aviation control systems. When millions log on to buy tickets to his movie, the transaction is secured by the architects of the global internet grid.
The individuals managing deep-sea fiber optic cables, enduring crushing atmospheric pressure at the bottom of the ocean.
Right. And if you run a search for the names of the lead thermodynamics engineer at the semiconductor plant or the senior aviation systems coder, you will find absolutely nothing.
Nothing. No Wikipedia pages, no fan clubs, no global recognition.
They are ghosts in the machine.
But they are the load-bearing pillars of the entire global economy. Without their silent, hyper-competent execution, the entire visible structure of celebrity and digital interaction instantly collapses. And this exposes a critical asymmetry in the longevity and security of these different types of talent. The assumption is usually that the visible frontman is the most secure position to hold.
But the reality is the exact opposite. Visibility is inherently vulnerable. When your talent relies on public attention, you invite fierce, endless competition.
Yeah, there are thousands of charismatic actors arriving in Hollywood every single year trying to replace Jim Carrey.
Visible talent is entirely subjugated to the unpredictable whims of public taste, the inevitable process of biological aging, and sudden cultural shifts. It's a highly precarious position.
While the invisible talent operates under a completely different set of economic physics.
Totally different.
When you spend 15 years in a windowless lab mastering the specific routing protocols of encrypted internet traffic or understanding the material science of silicon wafers, you are not competing in a beauty pageant.
Right. You are not worried about whether your demographic appeal is slipping.
You are systematically building an impenetrable moat of dense complexity around your career. The boring talent slowly becomes entirely irreplaceable.
It takes another human being 15 years of grinding, unglamorous dedication just to reach the starting line to even compete with you. The infrastructure talent trades the dopamine hit of public applause for the absolute leverage of being functionally indispensable.
So I really want you, the listener, to pause and interrogate your own ambitions right now. Which role are you exhausting yourself trying to play? Are you desperately trying to mold yourself into the charismatic frontman, the visible thought leader, the person constantly performing on the digital stage?
And are you doing that because it brings you genuine fulfillment or because society has convinced you that the infrastructure role is somehow lesser?
Right. If your natural cognitive wiring is perfectly adapted to sit in a quiet room and untangle complex logistical knots, you are fighting your own nature by trying to be Jim Carrey.
And the tragedy of forcing yourself into the wrong archetype is twofold. First, you will likely fail to become the transcendent frontman because you just lack the innate disposition for it.
It's an uphill battle.
Yeah. And second, and far more damaging, you deprive the world of the critical infrastructure you were uniquely designed to build. The world does not need more mediocre performers. It is desperate for brilliant architects.
That is such a crucial pivot in our understanding. Because if this quiet infrastructure-level talent is the true engine of progress, who actually possesses it? Like, how is it forged?
This gets into the internal psychology of it.
Exactly. We are moving from the external economics of talent to the internal psychology. It turns out that the raw materials for this kind of genius are often the exact traits that society clinically labels as flaws, or the deeply personal experiences that make people feel entirely alienated from their peers.
We really have to examine the hidden superpowers of pain and overthinking.
Yes. The translation of psychological pain into functional design is one of the most profound mechanisms of human innovation.
It really is. When an individual experiences deep trauma, significant hardship, or even just chronic friction in their life, they develop an involuntary survival mechanism.
Profound empathy.
Right, profound empathy. But we must strip away the sentimental connotations of that word. We are not talking about the ability to offer a comforting hug or express pity.
No, we are talking about empathy as a highly calibrated, predictive data filtering algorithm. It is a ruthless functional skill.
That is precisely the right way to frame it. When a human brain is subjected to chaos or emotional distress, it adapts by becoming hypervigilant. It learns to continuously scan the environment for subtle shifts in tone, micro-expressions, and systemic inconsistencies to predict and avoid further pain.
It's constantly looking for the threat.
Exactly. And this expands the individual's emotional vocabulary dramatically. They have been forced to analyze human behavior and discomfort at a granular level that a person who has lived an entirely insulated, frictionless life simply cannot access.
So when you take that hypervigilance, that expanded database of human friction, and you apply it to a professional discipline, it becomes an almost unfair advantage.
Oh, entirely.
Think about the physical products, the digital interfaces, or the customer services that feel almost magical to use. The ones where you interact with it and think, wow, it's like this machine is reading my mind. That seamlessness is not a happy accident.
No, it is the result of a designer who anticipated your frustration before you even felt it. A person who has navigated a life full of roadblocks is uniquely equipped to design systems that eliminate roadblocks for others.
They use their internalized memory of pain as a radar.
Right, to detect and smooth out the microscopic friction points in a user's journey.
A designer who has felt profoundly misunderstood in their personal life will write copy for an app that makes the user feel instantly validated. An engineer who grew up navigating the chaos of a disorganized environment will possess a burning, almost obsessive compulsion to build a software architecture that is flawlessly ordered and intuitive.
They are basically utilizing their own psychological scar tissue to tune the external world to a more harmonious frequency.
And society routinely views sensitivity, anxiety, or a history of emotional struggle as liabilities, right?
Right.
Particularly in the sterile, hyper-competitive environments of business and technology.
But the operational reality suggests the exact opposite. That sensitivity is the very instrument required to build humane, widely adopted systems.
This directly parallels another trait that is universally stigmatized, the tendency to overthink.
Oh, yes.
If you are listening to this and you identify as an overthinker, you have likely been told repeatedly to just let it go or stop overcomplicating things.
All the time.
Asking why a specific corporate policy exists, why a social interaction felt slightly off, or why a physical tool is designed poorly, these questions are treated as nuisances. They slow down the herd. The majority of people prefer the cognitive ease of just nodding and moving along.
But the clinical framing of overthinking is entirely flawed. What the herd dismisses as an annoyance is, in reality, a form of cognitive X-ray vision.
X-ray vision. Let's break down the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
What is an overthinker's brain actually doing that the average brain is not?
It is essentially an issue of RAM allocation random access memory.
Okay, how so?
An average brain encounters a minor daily friction, categorizes it as unimportant background noise, and clears it from memory to save energy.
Makes sense.
But the overthinker's brain allocates massive amounts of cognitive processing power to that same minor friction. They literally cannot clear the cache. They pull at the loose thread. They refuse to accept surface-level explanations because their brain demands to understand the structural root cause of the anomaly.
So most people walk through a poorly designed airport, get slightly annoyed by the signage, find their gate, and forget about it.
Right.
But the overthinker misses their flight because they are standing in the terminal, forensically analyzing the typography, the color contrast, and the spatial flow of the signs, wondering what cascade of terrible bureaucratic decisions led to such a hostile user experience.
Exactly. And look, it is an exhausting way to navigate daily life, undoubtedly. But grand structural inventions do not emerge from a vacuum. They are almost exclusively birthed because an individual with that specific cognitive architecture refused to accept a mundane annoyance.
They looked at a process everyone else accepted as just the way things are and asked, is there an immutable law of physics preventing this from being better? Or is it just a catastrophic lack of imagination?
I love that framing.
I often visualize the overthinker as a highly sensitive, commercial-grade smoke detector installed in a small residential kitchen.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. If you live with one, or if you are one, you know the daily reality is filled with false alarms. The alarm triggers over a slightly burnt piece of toast. It triggers because someone used a slightly passive-aggressive tone in an email. It is disruptive.
The false alarms test the patience of everyone in the immediate vicinity.
Yeah, but you do not uninstall that commercial-grade detector because that hypersensitive calibration is the only mechanism capable of saving the entire structure when a hidden electrical fire starts inside the walls.
Exactly. When a systemic flaw is embedded in a new company strategy or a catastrophic vulnerability is hidden in a piece of software, the people who go with the flow will not smell the smoke until the roof is physically collapsing on their heads.
The overthinker detected the thermal anomaly weeks in advance. The organization desperately needs them inside the building, even if they occasionally ruin breakfast.
The duality of the trait is its defining feature. It is a significant burden in the realm of the mundane, but it transforms into an unparalleled superpower in the realm of the critical.
Which brings us to the ultimate practical challenge for you, the listener. If we accept that these quiet infrastructure level talents, these superpowers disguised as flaws, trauma responses, and overthinking are incredibly valuable, how do we actually run reconnaissance on ourselves?
How do you spot it?
Yeah, how do you identify your own invisible talent when it looks nothing like playing a piano or writing code? This requires navigating what is arguably the most pervasive psychological blind spot in human development.
The curse of the natural.
Yes.
The cost of the natural explains why we are completely oblivious to our own most profound capabilities. Human beings operate under the subconscious assumption that whatever cognitive processes are easy and frictionless for us must be equally easy and frictionless for the rest of the species.
It is the classic analogy of the fish being entirely unaware of the concept of water.
Exactly. Because the fish has never experienced a vacuum, it cannot perceive the medium it moves through. If your brain is genetically and environmentally wired to process complex logistical variables instantly, you don't feel like a genius when you organize a chaotic international supply chain.
Don't feel a strain.
Right. You simply look at the disorganized variables and put them where they obviously belong.
And because you feel no strain, you assign zero value to the action. You assume anyone could have done it. But the reality of human neurodiversity is staggering. The tasks that you perform on autopilot are often the exact tasks that induce sheer panic in others.
We really need to ground this in concrete, everyday examples because listeners are absolutely performing these tasks right now and dismissing them as irrelevant quirks.
Let's look at the mundane superpowers.
Okay, consider the individual who can effortlessly organize physical or digital spaces. They walk into a cluttered room or look at a chaotic hard drive, and their brain automatically generates a highly efficient taxonomic structure.
Or the person who possesses the ability to spot microscopic errors. They can scroll through a 50-page legal document and their eyes violently snap to a double space, a misused comma, or a slight inconsistency in formatting. It physically bothers them to see it.
Deep, unbroken active listening is another prime example. The capacity to sit with someone who is rambling, emotionally distressed, and disorganized in their speech, and silently process their verbal chaos without interrupting, judging, or losing focus.
That is incredibly rare. Then there is the capacity for relentless, repetitive execution. The person who can sit at a desk and manually update thousands of rows in a spreadsheet for 8 hours straight without their brain seeking a dopamine distraction.
Or the inverse, right? The person who falls down an exhaustive research rabbit hole, spending an entire weekend investigating the migratory patterns of a specific beetle just because a question popped into their head.
Yeah, and to the individual executing these behaviors, they feel aggressively normal.
But the crucial step in self-discovery is recognizing the extreme contrast. You must realize that highly successful, wealthy, and powerful executives would literally rather run a physical marathon than sit still and exhaustively research a single technical topic for 10 hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are brilliant, world-renowned creative directors who physically cannot organize a basic tax spreadsheet without experiencing intense cognitive fatigue. Your baseline normal state is someone else's definition of a miracle.
It really is.
So how do we use this knowledge to navigate our careers? This leads us to a direct confrontation with perhaps the most ubiquitous piece of modern career advice ever formulated.
Let me guess. Follow your passion.
Yes. From graduation speeches to self-help books, the mantra is always, follow your passion, do what you love. It sounds beautiful, but it is a profoundly flawed metric for identifying world-changing talent.
I completely agree.
The most reliable filter is not finding what you love. It is finding what is not painful for you.
The prioritization of not painful over passion is a ruthlessly pragmatic approach to high achievement. We really must dissect why the lack of exhaustion is a superior metric.
Okay, let's...
It's true. World-shaping talent is not about a sudden burst of brilliance. It is fundamentally an exercise in endurance.
Because passion is a neurochemical spike, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a flood of dopamine and adrenaline triggered by novelty, excitement, or a grand vision.
Exactly. But biological systems cannot sustain a spike indefinitely. Like all intense emotions, passion is inherently volatile. It fades.
You cannot wake up 365 days a year fueled by raw passion for a complex project. The day the code breaks, the day the investors pull out, the day the research hits a dead end, the dopamine vanishes.
If passion was your only fuel source, the engine stops right there. But if you have identified a task that you can endure, the tedious, unglamorous, grinding details of the work, without your energy completely depleting, you have discovered an area of supreme competitive advantage.
You can outlast your peers.
You will. When the passion of your competitors evaporates and the friction of the work becomes too painful for them to bear, they will quit. You will continue, not because you are overflowing with joy, but simply because the specific nature of the work does not drain your internal battery.
It is the endurance metric. Think back to the engineers at DensoWave or the nameless team that developed the Wi-Fi protocols. They were not walking into the laboratory every morning, vibrating with euphoric passion.
Not at all. The daily reality of that scientific work is grueling. It involves months and frequently years of failed experiments. It requires staring at oscilloscopes, measuring microscopic variations in radio frequencies, logging thousands of data points that yield absolutely no usable results.
Right. It is deeply repetitive, highly technical, and emotionally frustrating.
They were not fueled by a daily adrenaline rush. They possessed the incredibly rare talent of not quitting the inquiry. Their tolerance for the boredom and the meticulous frustration of the scientific method was simply higher than everyone else's.
I can anticipate the listener's internal resistance to this idea, though. It can sound incredibly bleak.
It can.
Like, are we suggesting that people should abandon the search for a burning purpose in their lives? Should you just accept your fate and look for whatever soul-crushing chore makes you the least want to take a nap?
It sounds bleak only if you romanticize the origin of innovation. It is not about settling for misery. It is about understanding the actual mechanics of how massive systemic impact is generated.
No, attack that.
Passion is wonderful, but relying on it as the primary catalyst is statistically dangerous. If we examine the history of world-changing technologies, they almost never originate from a grand, passionate delusion of, I am going to save the world today.
They originate from small, deeply grounded, often selfish motives.
Exactly. They start with low-level annoyance.
Low-level annoyance. Let's paint a picture of that.
Imagine a systems architect working in a corporate office in the late 1980s. They are deeply annoyed by the multi-step physical process required to transfer a digital file from their computer to a colleague's computer across the room.
The old sneaker net.
Right. They do not have a passionate, sweeping vision to revolutionize global telecommunications. They are just irritated by the friction disrupting their Tuesday afternoon. But crucially, writing the code to fix that specific problem is not painful for them. It is within their zone of endurance.
So they spend a quiet weekend building a small, hyper-specific script just to automate that transfer and fix their own localized problem.
Yes, and because it works, they share it with the colleague. The colleague shares it with another department. The script scales, gets iterated upon, and eventually forms the foundational architecture for a protocol that millions of people use to share data globally.
The origin was not a grand, passionate vision. It was a low pain tolerance for a specific inefficiency paired with a high endurance for the technical work required to eliminate it.
Small, grounded motives snowball into massive global innovations precisely because they are rooted in solving actual reality, not in satisfying the ego's desire for a grand narrative.
Wow. Let's pull all of these threads together. We began by visualizing Shohei Ohtani, the ultimate visible frontman, performing under the stadium lights, and we contrasted him with the entirely invisible engineers who built the Wi-Fi network, allowing millions to stream his performance.
Both the visible and the invisible are utilizing profound, highly developed talents that shape our experience of the world.
But the critical, unshakable lesson here is that visibility has absolutely zero correlation with structural value.
They are two independent variables. Conflating them is what causes individuals to misdiagnose their own worth and potential.
And the stakes of this misunderstanding are not just theoretical, right? They are immensely high. There is a profound warning here about the tragedy of unutilized talent.
It is perhaps the greatest tragedy of human capital. It is a devastating outcome for an individual to age into obscurity, reaching the end of their life genuinely believing they had no talent simply because their specific cognitive abilities did not translate into public fame or visible performance.
That is a localized tragedy for their self-esteem. But on a macro level, it is a catastrophic loss of potential for the species.
It truly is.
Think about the alternate timeline of our world. If the person who conceived of Wi-Fi had succumbed to the cultural pressure of visibility, if they had looked in the mirror and said, I am not a charismatic leader, I don't know how to build a personal brand. I'm just a quiet person obsessed with the physics of radio waves, so I must have nothing of value to offer society.
If they had believed that lie, we might literally be dragging thick, wired Ethernet cables behind our laptops as we move from room to room today.
The friction of daily life would be exponentially higher. When you fail to recognize and develop your own mundane superpower, your specific flavor of invisible infrastructure talent, it is not merely a personal failure to self-actualize.
No, it is a material deprivation for the rest of humanity. You are withholding the specific structural fix that you are meant to contribute to the global network.
That leaves us with a heavy but incredibly empowering realization. I want you, the listener, to carry a specific thought experiment with you as you go about your week.
What should they be looking for?
I want you to mentally review the past month of your life. Search your memory for a tiny, seemingly insignificant friction point that you quietly solved for yourself.
Just a small thing.
Yeah, maybe it was an absurdly complex spreadsheet workaround you engineered at your job just so you could leave the office 20 minutes earlier on a Friday. Or maybe it is a bizarre, highly specific organizational system you created in your own kitchen or digital workspace.
Something that felt completely mundane to you.
Exactly. It is almost guaranteed to be a hyper-specific, utterly unglamorous fix that you engineered solely to make your own day marginally less irritating. You have undoubtedly assumed that absolutely no one else on the planet would ever care about it, let alone value it.
Because of the curse of the natural.
Right. But filter that assumption through everything we have dissected today in this deep dive. What if that hyper-specific, incredibly boring fix is the exact structural blueprint that millions of other people are desperately waiting for?
It's a powerful question.
And what if the only reason the world doesn't have it yet is because you are just sitting on it, convinced it isn't flashy enough to share?